Thanks for the intro. I don't think I've been called a luminary ever, so I appreciate that. Thanks everyone for taking the time today. Excited to chat. I've been doing startups for like 13 years now. So I started my first startup in 2010. Had two different companies, two really different experiences. So I basically had all the experiences, ups, downs, the whole roller coaster. So I hope this is helpful and interesting. And I'm not the longest talker, so I'll leave time for Q&A as well. But thanks again for taking the time today. So quickly about me, whoops, I don't know how to go back. I went to school in Boston. Then I worked for 4 years in New York after that. I just will mention that in that like I didn't start startups till a little later. Some people jump into it out of high school. I worked at a few different consulting firms and banking firms before I got my MBA after a few years of working. There's mixed feelings about MBAs and startups, so I wanted to just mention that because I know that sometimes that can be a hot button issue. So as I was working, I never really felt like I fit well in the consulting or banking world. I was fine, but it wasn't really like my passion, or wasn't excelling at that. So after Wharton, I started my first company called Hire Next. I'll be telling stories throughout this talk about my experiences, so I won't go too far into it. But Hire Next, I started in 2010, raised a seed round, and then eventually sold it in 2013. And the eventual product was an online proctoring platform for colleges and universities to administer exams. So actually, I was in Philadelphia, but I moved to St. Louis while I was working for the acquirer. Hung out with Chris for a few years at Tech Artista. And then after the earnout, I took some time off and then started SteadyMD, which is where I'm at today. Pretty crazy, 7.5 years later. So I think when you start a company, it's just like unfathomable it would last that long, good or bad. So pretty crazy that we're still around and thriving, and it still feels like day one sometimes. So pretty cool. So that's my brief bio. I'm sure we can talk more about that later too. So what have I learned in the last 10 plus years? So I guess it's been 13 years, but we've rounded down. I'll just go through some lessons I've learned. Hopefully they're helpful. One thing I want to be clear about, like, I made a ton of mistakes along the way. I didn't get it right the first time. I've probably wasted years on some things that I wasn't doing right. So these are just things that I've picked up. They're idiosyncratic to me, though. I think the good thing about startups is there's no rules. Like, if someone told me the rules, I'd immediately think about how to break them. So I think that's how startup people think. So the best way to get me to do something is tell me I can't do it, and then I go for it. So there's some tips I've learned over the years. I kind of divided it up into little sections. So first thing I want to talk about is idea generation. How many of you guys have heard the ideas don't matter, it's all execution? Like, that's like a kind of a startup, I know, meme, it's repeated a lot. I think that's pretty silly. I think you can really do a lot of things to make sure that your idea is sound before you launch or write a line of code or do anything. So it all starts with really being proactive and making sure that you're paying attention to just everyday life. So if you're in a line, you're filling out a form on a piece of paper, you're just frustrated by something, that's a startup opportunity. So we all run into these things day after day, and then when someone launches something more convenient, you're like, well, that was so obvious, but they were the ones that really dug into that and launched that business. So you have we all called cabs, and randomly they came to our house, when I was younger, and obviously you should press a button and the car comes to your house and you see where, but they were the one, Uber was the one that figured that out. So I think constantly be building ideas. I probably have hundreds of ideas that I've written down over the years, maybe more. A lot of them are silly, a lot of them are huge ideas, teeny ideas. They're ideas I want someone else to do, I would never do, but I'm constantly thinking of them, and probably, every day. So anyone can do this. It's just whenever you're frustrated or you feel that feeling in your stomach that like something's off, that's a good time to come with an idea. Another thing that's key, which I kind of developed over the years, is having friends who will discuss your ideas with you. There's not really a huge culture, even here in St. Louis, of like, if you have a crazy idea, a lot of people just dismiss it with skepticism. Find people in your life that will really like take the time to discuss things with you. Like, so if I called my buddies in Startup Land and said, hey, I want to compete with SpaceX. I want to fly to Neptune, not Mars. They would legitimately discuss it with me. It wouldn't be like, are you crazy? That's silly. Like, find people that are like really into discussing and crunching on ideas with you, and just ignore the naysayers, because it's easy to be skeptical about any idea. A lot of people are like, immediately tell you why an idea won't work. Find the people that will crunch with you why it will work, or really discuss it with you. Another thing you should think about is yourself. Like, is this a good idea for me to do? A lot of ideas I have, I want someone else to do it. I want them to build this thing. I'm actually delighted when I come up with an idea and someone else launches a startup in that space, because then I can see if it's going to work or not. Like, that makes me really happy, especially if it's an idea that I didn't really want to do, but I wanted someone else to try. Those are the best. Okay, so that's kind of coming up with ideas. I'm really big on research. So I think a lot of times you ask startup founders, is there a market for this? And they'll just come at you with like the top-down total addressable market. Like, oh, healthcare is a $20 trillion piece of the American economy, or 20, I don't know what the actual number is. Education is a $10 trillion market, but really that's not the market. The market is how many buyers of your product are there. So like for education, how many school districts are there? How many actually will buy this product? For if you're selling to hospitals, okay, there's 4,000 hospitals. It's not $20 trillion. Your market is 4,000 people. And you know, how many of those actually have the budget to buy your product? That's the real market research. How consolidated is the market? So is like the top 100 hospitals 80% of the spend, and the other ones you have no chance of selling to? That's another thing people don't think about. The pricing of competitors and how sticky they are. Is there any margin here? Is there a switching cost? What's the switching cost from not doing anything? People don't really think about that stuff. They just think about like, this is a massive market. And I think that's it's important to really dive into those things. Also just ask yourself personally, what's your goal? So like, kind of like, what's the opportunity cost of launching this idea? Probably for a lot of people, it's getting a job or working somewhere else, right? So that's your salary. That's kind of like your opportunity cost of working on a new startup or a new idea. How in the industry, how big of a margin is on the revenue of this business? Like, what are the multiples on the revenue of whatever you're trying to get into? And does it make any sense for you personally to launch this business? Like a lot of times people go into a market that's so small they have no chance. They have no chance. So you got to really kind of know your numbers and know everything about a market or idea. And honestly, there's no excuse for not knowing everything. There's like so much data out there, and I meet with startup founders all the time, and like they don't know their stuff. And I'm like, you're gonna devote your life to this thing, and you don't know everything about this. You're not obsessed with the market of like all the data around it. So some tips that I do when I'm like, I get obsessed with some industry or I really want to learn about something. There's the obvious ones like Twitter and Google. Like, do Google alerts for whatever you'd be surprised how many articles a day are about your little niche topic. Obviously Twitter is a big one. All the niche Twitter feeds about whatever industry. One thing that like many people don't do, but I think is like really helpful, SEC filings. So whatever company is in this space that you want to go into, go to their annual report or S1. If you read that thing, you're just an industry expert. Risks, market size, they go through all of it. They do all that stuff for you. So I like, if I'm really interested in an industry or like in digital health, I read all the S1s and all the annual reports. I just know all about the industry just from that. Some investment banking analyst did all that research for you and just pared it down. It's great. So those are some tips I have. Another thing, a lot of times the school that, if you're in school, the library actually has a lot of resources and subscriptions. Sometimes they'll have subscriptions that cost them $20,000 a year, like Thomson Reuters or whatever it is. If you have an intern, maybe they can do that research for you if they go to that school. Don't tell the school I said that, but that's a tip. So okay, so you have your idea, you've researched the heck out of it, and you kind of have, you know everything about it. You're like, okay, this idea is rock solid. Then what do? You don't start building your product. You actually validate the idea within the space. So start interviewing folks that are in the industry. A lot of times people say, what do you think of this idea? It's pretty easy and cheap for whoever you talk to say, it's a great idea, this is amazing. Because most likely your product or idea works on the spreadsheet, it makes sense, it saves them money, whatever. You really want to get at the willingness to pay. How much would you pay for this? How much would you, how much, is this in the, is there any budget line item that this applies to? If you can't figure that out, you haven't done enough research. I'd probably talk to a minimum of like 30 to 50 people in the industry before I launch any company, just because you can really, but you have to ask the right questions around willingness to pay, not does this idea make sense? The idea will always make sense. So look for the willingness to pay. And you learn this the hard way. You launch things that make sense for the buyer, make sense for the person using it, saves everyone money, is awesome, and then no one ever buys it. And you're like, what? Why didn't they buy it? And maybe it wasn't, the savings weren't as much as you thought, or the benefit wasn't as much as you thought, but it just didn't work. So you have to really work hard. Okay, so you validate it with the market, and then if you're in a consumer business, throw up a landing page and just spend $1,000 on Google and see what the cost per click is, or Facebook, or whatever your thing is. It's crazy to me that you'd like devote time building an app or a product and you don't know at least the cost per click. God willing, you can put a credit card page up and see the cost per people who would actually put in their credit card. So I think, like, to me, a lot of people don't do this stuff because they get obsessed with the product and the features, and if it works, where they're not like nerding out on, is anyone willing to pay for this thing? And so that's where you see a lot of startups miss. So that's what I think. Like, those are some of the tips I've come up with over the years on idea generation. And so, like, I think with SteadyMD, I saw a big market opportunity in the original SteadyMD, not what we're doing now. It was a direct-to-consumer virtual primary care platform. So patients paid a monthly fee, and they got unlimited access to their doctor. So it's kind of like concierge medicine, direct primary care. I knew there was a willingness to pay because people were doing it in the brick and mortar world. I knew there was a big macro problem with the shortage of primary care doctors and the ability to get an appointment. We'd validated the cost per click, at least, me and my co-founder. So, okay, so we launched it. And actually, we launched it in probably September of 2016. And the first 3 months, we got 40 patients. So it's like not that much, right? We're charging $100 a month. So it's not that great of a business. But we were constantly trying hundreds of marketing experiments. Facebook, Twitter, calling people, mail, texting, going to, converting to like nothing was working. And then one of the 100 experiments was we had this weightlifter doctor named Dr. Spencer. He put up a Facebook post. Hey, I might be taking on new patients. He had like 50,000 followers. He got 100 signups in one day. And we're like, oh, the thing we're selling is really alignment with our patients, not access to a doctor. And that took us down this road of niche practices in different categories around nutrition and athletics. And that's what kind of got us our start and really started to get cranking. But we didn't waste a lot of money on marketing before we discovered that. We did 1 million experiments, and then out popped, one of the 100 experiments worked. And a lot of people thought that like influencer marketing was this like brilliant move back then when it wasn't that popular. I was like, I'm not that smart. I just tried 10,000 things and one of them worked. So that's just a real example from like when we launched SteadyMD, we took this incremental approach, and that really helped us grow the first few years. We pivoted later, but I think it's a good example of really like testing out an idea. And then obviously you can always work on the website and conversion, stuff like that, but you want to make sure your basics are working before you invest real money, or you're going to waste a lot of money on your idea. I thought this was interesting. I have two major pivots in my career, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about. Just in general, like, let's say even if your business is going well, constantly be like analyzing your assets and what you have, and if there's a willingness to pay for those things. Are you doing something, like, did you try and find a solution to something and there was no software solution, there was no vendor to outsource to, and you had to do it yourself, and you built something really cool? That might be an interesting opportunity for you. So like, there was like this online video game, just one example, called Glitch. It was like this. Anyone know where the story's going? Yeah, he knows. So this guy's building this online video game, and the developers built like this little internal chat system for them to keep up with each other, and that chat system was Slack. It's like, or what's another one? I forgot from the examples. But that's one of my favorite ones, because that's like a good example of like they had this asset within the company, and that became the company. Listen to your customers. When you're pitching your business, if they're constantly asking about your technology or like something else that you're doing, you're like, why do they keep asking about that? That's probably a good signal that that you should consider that for like a possible pivot. Listen to their pain points. So just quick story time. So my first business out of school was something called the Certified Business Laureate. So that was going to be like the SAT to enter the corporate world. So you take this finance, accounting, marketing exam, and Excel and PowerPoint. You get a score, and that score is going to become like this ubiquitous SAT score to get your first entry-level job. I still think it's a good idea, even though it didn't work. Like, to this day, I think it's a great idea. But no one wants to take, there's like, obviously it was tough business to launch because no one really wants to take another test. But so at launch, it was grinding on it for years, and then we launched in the testing centers, like the Prometric, Pearson testing centers, if any of you have taken a standardized test before. And I was like, I could probably do this online. So I outsourced to this company called ProctorU, and then ProctorU is using these live proctors to watch the exam. So I said, maybe I can automate this. So we're crunching on it, and we built this whole automated online proctoring system. And then as I'm pitching the business, most of the people who were talking were like, that online system you're using to administer your test is really cool. Can I put my tests on that? So I pivoted the whole business to be this online test administration system, and then eventually was acquired by ProctorU. So the company I was outsourcing to originally got mad at me for like competing with them, so they bought us. And it turned out great. It was a great result. Kind of a crazy story on the exit and the sale, but that's the story for another day. But that was kind of the first time I realized, like, you should always be looking for a pivot. The second time, like SteadyMD, the consumer business was going pretty well. We had thousands of paying customers nationwide. In order to operate that business, we had to build infrastructure in all 50 states to see patients, which is not trivial in telehealth. Like, it's really, really hard. So, but we did it. We muscled it out. We got doctors licensed in all 50 states, set it up. We had built all this technology to see patients everywhere, calling prescriptions, labs. And then early 2020, we kind of looked at the business. It was growing like very linearly. We're like, how can we accelerate this? And we kind of had three different options. One was we can start selling people the product and technology because it's great tech. We can rent out our clinician network to other digital health companies, or we can just like nerd out on licensing and credentialing, and that can be the business. And so we actually picked the middle one, and that became SteadyMD. So now we're powering like a big portion of the digital health industry with our clinician network. But February 2020, I remember the board meeting of like talking about our business, cost of acquisition. The last slide I said, I'm also experimenting and renting out my clinician network to other digital health companies. And then COVID hit the next month, and it was just like, so a little bit of luck there. But we were always kind of dipping our toes and experimenting with like, how can we grow this thing faster? And so don't be afraid to pivot. That's a lesson there. Not sure how relevant. Yeah. Sure.
How do you consider that the MSP is technically, it's IT company or it's a service company that uses technology in order to
Tech-enabled services.
So the tool that basically you got it from other companies who developed it, you integrate it within your business and build the physician network, the physician groups. I mean, when you basically started the project, what was the first step? You started to build the tools that provide the video, the teleconferencing, and so on, or basically you put all the set of tools that is needed for registration, for diagnosis, and everything like that in one place, and the business is basically how to acquire the licenses in 50 states, how to bring a physician to your services, and you became a service provider for the patient, but not as a regular IT company. I mean, what was the process?
Well, I think what people are buying is the clinician time and capacity, but in order to access that, there's a ton of tech involved. So you have to integrate into our.
You build your own system. I mean,
Yeah.
system.
Yes.
Kind of, you are the provider having the relationship between the patient and the physician by using the right tools that you equip.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think digital health companies integrate with our system. They send us the visits, and our clinicians see them. That seems simple, but that moment is incredibly complex with state licensing, matching clinician supply between full-time, part-time, and contractor clinicians, training them on that protocol, making sure that they're, making sure the workforce management calculation is correct. And then obviously there's the technical integration with sending the appointment data into our clinic and the clinician meeting it. So like when we launched, we had our own system like that, and we had to build tech for over the last few years to allow other people to integrate into our system. So, I mean, when we pivoted, I had 20 people. It was 20 doctors. So now we have 500 and hundreds, 100 employees. So in terms of fundraising, I'm not sure how relevant it's to everyone, but I thought it'd be helpful. I think a lot of times, like, fundraising advice is around for companies that are already awesome and like have all this great data, and it's like not that useful and relevant. And I never maybe just one for 6 months of my 13-year career, I just had like rock solid. Everyone like trying to invest in our company. The rest of the time, I'm running like a very rigorous process because it's not a slam dunk. It's not like obvious. It's not competitive. You have to really grind it out. So most of the time, you don't just hit the lottery, and from day one, you have product market fit, and you can just raise money. So this applies to getting a loan, raising money from VCs, like all that stuff. So I would say at like a high level, like you really have to run a process. When I raised the first round of finance, over 2 rounds of financings, I met with over 300 funds. So 150 each time. That's how many, so that's funds, that's not meetings. So that could be multiple meetings with each entity. You have to have a rigorous system for tracking all those conversations and making sure you're following up and taking notes at each step of the process. I think a lot of times people are doing that in a spreadsheet, or like they're just kind of keeping track of it with their calendar or email. That's not going to work. If you're going to have hundreds of conversations, you need to really know and really have a great tight process for tracking and doing all that. So track every meeting, take detailed notes on the process. If this applies to biz dev too, or getting a loan or raising from VCs. It's all the same. Make sure that you're being really rigorous about the data collection, and also like it's a numbers game. You know, I'm not rounding up. I'm rounding down for the number of meetings it took me. Yeah, sure.
Can you just double click on, from your experience, what the most useful like notes are that you've kept?
I just used like Trello.
No, but in terms of like what are you keeping track of?
Reasons for 90% of the time it's reasons why they're rejecting you. So it's like market size, team, yeah, you know, geography. Like, so I just kind of like categorize them. And if something's piling up too much, you're like, I guess we got to fix that one. Another lesson you want to take is if you're really listening to them, it'll frustrate you a lot, but you have to like be aware of like how you're coming across. And even if it's illogical to you, that's what they're honing in on. That's the objection reason. You're like, oh, that's nothing to do with my business. It doesn't matter. That's the thing you have to overcome. You probably want to put that on the first 1 or 2 slides if there's like this like objection that keeps coming up. Most of the time, like it's so easy for them to say no. So you're gonna get a lot of data there, and just trust the process, keep grinding, and don't give up. I'd say if you had like 50 meetings, you have 0 interest, maybe something's wrong, like 0. But if you're starting to get interest, it's just going to take a lot of work to get done. That's my experience. Maybe some people have different experiences. Understand the VC calculus or the investor calculus. So like a VC has to write a memo that goes to their LPs saying why they invested in your company. They're not just making the decision on their own. Like they have to tell their partners about you. So understand that they have to do that. Make that easy for them. Write that memo for them and say, here's something you can share with your team. Don't expect them to hear your pitch and repeat it back to everyone. Like make that process really easy. So understand like what the calculus is there, how many meetings they're having. They're having thousands of meetings. How do you break through? Most investors aren't going to do a lot of work. They're not going to work to understand your product or business. They're going to just listen to you for that meeting and then make a decision in the room and not tell you till maybe never, or hopefully they'll tell you in the next week or 2. But like, I'd say understanding how the investors think. If you're going for a loan, like they got to go to the loan committee and underwrite this thing. They don't want to get creative there. They don't want. It's just like an underwriting thing. So you gotta make sure you mitigate that and understand that. Understand the risks. I think of like different risks that you're trying to overcome, like product risk, market risk, timing, competitive. I have like this list I can share, but like you want to make sure that you convince them like, okay, the product will work. That should be pretty easy to convince them. We can execute. Those are the 2 you can control. You can't control the market. You can tell them about the market size, like I said, but you can't control that. And you can only really control like the management team, the execution, and the product. So make sure that's rock solid. Those are some of my investors. Some nice names on there. Obviously, I have like crazy stories from fundraising, but keep going because we only have. Talk a little bit about culture. So big lessons, like as you grow. I think working with 15 people is great, but that doesn't work for a company of 100. It's really like think about as you scale. I would say like focus hard on data. What is the data you want everyone to pay attention to? What are the numbers you want everyone in the company to like kind of hone in on? And this is harder the bigger you get. It has to be something that's really easy to understand and aligns with the company's vision. Something like you might see like, oh, we share this spreadsheet to share data at the company. It gets shared every day. That thing's going to break. You have to like automate things, try and get things in a place where reporting on the data of your company is like streamlined and really easy to understand. And then talk about culture. Like I know everyone when we were a company of 10 to 30, let's say, maybe 50. I still know everyone, but like the 118th employee doesn't really know me and doesn't get me and doesn't get my jokes. And like you have to really understand the bigger you get, you can't act the same way. You can't just like start brainstorming. Everyone will listen to every word you say, and they're going to react to it. So you have to make sure you're really careful of that. I think culturally, a few things that I've noticed over the years that are really helpful. Watch out for the "I need more information." People, like, you ask them a question, "I need more information." There's no more information. This is the information I presented to you at this meeting is the information we have, and we have to make a decision. You don't want to get stuck in this, like, let me collect more info, let me, like, that you have to be like action oriented and a bias towards action. And the bigger you get, the harder it is to do that. When someone has a new idea, everyone goes crazy, and there's like all these resources. Like, what's the minimum way we can test this idea? What's the easiest way to test this? Is there a way we can just test this manually for the first 10 times we do it and then see if it scales? Is this even a problem? This happens a lot on the product side, where like someone suggests a feature. I'm pointing out Liz, who's on our product team. It turns out that like it's only useful for 2% of our clients or 10% of our clients. You're like, oh, why did we build that? We could have just done that manually until it broke. You got to make those decisions. I think like make sure people are taking responsibility. I think that obviously the bigger you are, like there's more of like siloed units, but everyone has to kind of be responsible for the work that they're doing and the decisions they make and what they implement. This might be obvious, but I think it's worth saying. I think as a leader, you're obsessed with your business, and you kind of know. You can skip to chapter 18 on most conversations. Like I've had a lot of the conversations I have with my employees, I've already had them in my head. I know what they're going to say, but you still have to do the initial part. So don't be the guy or gal that jumps in and like hits them with like a chapter 18 conversation when they haven't had the first 8 chapters or 10 chapters. That's a really important lesson I've learned over the years, because I think really fast, and I make decisions fast too. Like I already made the decision, but before you got your sentence out, I made the decision. But you have to be patient and run that process. That's hard for me. I don't know what this is a graph of. I actually forgot. It might be our number of employees. Number of employees. This is our number of employees. So don't be too impressed. It's not too hard to hire people, right? You got to make the money to pay them. That's the problem. So yeah, I think we've struggled like at every stage and every inflection point. You have to have people that can grow with the company. So like obviously in the beginning, everyone's doing everything. The founders are in it. You're all like in one room, like grinding away. Then you kind of get product market fit, and like there's 30 people, but you're all still, you know everyone, you know what everyone's doing. There's no information gaps at all. Everyone knows everything going on. And then once you get like up to the 100 mark, you really have to bring on a different sort of person that's a little more execution focused on their one thing, and isn't like this jack of all trades. So like as you go up that curve, it gets more and more specialized. So I think as a CEO and as a founder, it's really important to be direct and clear about what you want. It's like I said, like you can't be in like brainstorming mode with everyone at the company all the time. You have to really like hone in and be super clear, like this is the result I want. Otherwise, folks will kind of go off on different tangents. That's probably the biggest challenge when you get to a company, because you don't know what everyone's doing all the time, right? So try and be really data focused. Try and be really direct about what you want, and then evolve your company as it grows. And don't be afraid to cut people that aren't scaling. It's obviously you can do that in a very humane and great way if you do it early. If you wait, it sucks. You wait for like layoffs or something. That's not fun. So make sure if you have to cut people early because they're not scaling, just you can do it in a really in the best way possible, where the relationship is intact versus something a little more brutal. Sure.
What's the timeline? And what does that big increase? Is that COVID, or is that just you end
No, we just pivoted. We pivoted after 3 years, and then we had to hire. We were at 20 people, 25 people, 20 docs. Now we're in the 100 plus people and 500 docs, maybe, like clinicians. So it's just the revenue chart's similar. It's just like, it was just a crazy spike. Anyone else have a question? Sure.
When did you get the first investment? What year?
So we did like the seed round of SteadyMD. I guess that was 2017. So me and my co-founder put some money in to start, and then 2017 we did a seed round, and then I think 2019 was a Series A, Series B was 2021. So like every 2 years.
And did you talk also to angels?
Say it again.
Did you talk also to angels? Angels.
Yeah, the first seed round was all angels, and then and it's funny because my first startup I raised probably $1 million over 3 years. So it was like always just kind of like small, and then raising $1 million seed round for me was like amazing. It was like, oh my God, this is what am I going to do? This is great. So that.
Is it complicated on your cap table to have so many angels investors?
Nah, it's overblown. The complicated cap table thing is like, you can always, it's not a big deal. For me, yeah, it's no one really, it's not really a thing, I think. If you have like 200, yeah, maybe, but like if you have less than 50 angels, no one cares. Also, like when I did my first startup, it wasn't as like open and clear how to do stuff. Now there's so much information on how to fundraise. It's like, you don't really have an excuse not knowing the market and like how to, like all the terms and everything. I had to really get books to look up the terms on like cap tables and term sheets. You read a book, like term sheets. Now it's like, there's so much content out there. You should just know. I don't really think there's an excuse. Like the founder was shocked when they sold their company. They didn't make any money because of you should probably know that if you're going to sign this document, you can. It's just math. It's not that hard. So I don't have, like, to me, the amount of information out there now is crazy compared to when I started out, even 10 years ago. So it's pretty cool. I'm jealous. I'm jealous of all the companies starting out now with all the information they have. So this is the last section, and then we can do more Q&A or just end it, whatever. So like, there's been a lot of uncertainty over the last few years. And I think there's like a few like big lessons. One of them is like, I'll go from the bottom up. Like a lot happens in a short amount of time. And I think like as leaders and as just working at startups, you tend to focus on like what's clear and easy, not what's most necessary. I can do this spreadsheet and fill it out perfectly and everything locks and it's perfect. That's a good example of like, that's not easy, but like it feels great to like get that done, but no one wants to call 200 customers and burn the phones and get rejected 197 times, right? Like that's not fun, but the second one is the necessary thing. The first one is like, it's like a complete circle you can do. So I'd watch out for that and like really focus on what you need to get done, even if it's hard. I like to run towards the fire. Don't run away from the fire, run towards the fire, because obviously the fire spreads if you don't put it out. As a founder and a leader, like a lot of times there's no one else that can do what you do. You just got to kind of accept that and realize that like no one's gonna really get it. Very few people, like maybe some other founders I talk to, but like your friends or people not, it's like explaining having kids to someone without kids. Like you can explain it intellectually, but there's really like nothing like it, like running a company and like having that responsibility. So you have to accept that. And then I think like the last thing I'll say is you have to get a little zen and not let highs and lows like get to you. It's a total roller coaster running a startup. Like you're gonna have amazing days and bad days and everything in between. Like you play poker, you focus on the process, you play enough hands, you're going to win. But you're going to have terrible beats and you're going to have great, super lucky wins. So just focus on just never getting too high or too low on those. Obviously, if you're emotional, it's okay, but you never know what's around the corner and what's the next thing. So I think I'll just leave it at that. Make sure you're keep not getting too frazzled no matter what happens, and just have that attitude I'm in this for the long haul. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this till it's run its course, and don't get too crazy. And that's it.
Does anyone have any questions?
No questions? People were asking them during the. Oh.
Hey, thank you so much. It was really informative to hear about your journey and your story. I wanted to ask a question about what you said at the beginning. There was a tool that you use or something you look up to look at your competitors' kind of financial status or investment?
I mean, I think competitors, I don't know, they're probably private companies, but I think when you're doing market research,
yeah,
there's a lot of so I think obviously there's Google and Twitter and just doing an alert on your market and just reading everything, follow all the people that are in the industry. And just my little, the one specific tactical pro tip I'd say is there's a lot of information in the financial filings of publicly traded companies in your space. Mm-hmm. They talk about market risk, market size, competitors. If you read those, you get a lot of knowledge about your industry.
And where do you find that, for publicly?
SEC.gov.
SEC.gov,
yeah,
so
you
you'll
go.
find
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Perfect.
or you can Google it.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Oh, we got one.
When you started, I'm curious to understand, why did you think that this business fits you?
That's a great question. Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I just done my first startup. We pivoted to this online proctoring business. So I connected up 1 million students to take an exam online, connected up via video. The proctor did something and logged into a system. It's it's very similar to telehealth. I like telehealth. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. So, So after I left ProctorU, I wanted to do something that was really impactful to society, had a really potential to be huge, scalable, something I was passionate about. So I started to study the healthcare industry. I had a ton of ideas. I went down rabbit holes like physical therapy, a lot of ideas that were actually launched by other people. But I got really passionate about primary care. Just I'm young, I'm pretty healthy. There's really not an option for me to have a doctor. If I go to the doctor right now, just down the street here, well, what are you here for? I just want to be healthy. It'd be I can't bill for that. So they bill when you're sick, right? And so that was the genesis of the idea. I got kind of obsessed with it. And one thing I'll say, I had dozens of ideas, but I knew. The second I thought of it, I'm this is what I have to do. I remember I wrote my dad an email, this long email about the idea. And that basically was the idea, and I executed it. The idea I wrote down was what we launched, basically. It's pretty cool. So I think you kind of just know in your belly when you got an idea, you're I have to do this. That's the idea you should do. Because you're going to spend, who knew, probably 10 years of my life is dedicated to this. I didn't think. Yeah, talk to me for 10 minutes about the business, you'll know I'll kill for it. It's I think there's new. If you ask anyone in this space or that's met me, this is my life's work. So I think they just saw that. I don't know. It's a good question, but that's what they say. Yeah. So it's. But I understand what you're saying. I don't have a personal story. It's just. Yeah.
How much was it a barrier or obstacle, especially talking
Yeah, I don't have the I don't have the counterfactual. You know, I like don't know. If I had some crazy personal thing, maybe it would have been easier. I don't know. I just know I have the information I have. I am who I am, and that's what I did. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's probably my number one thing is I don't pretend I'm something I'm not. Like there's other startup founders that are much more flashy. You saw this presentation. I'm not like a TED Talk person. Like, but I'm blunt, transparent, and I like care deeply about my business. So I think people see that. I hope they do. That's right.
Yeah, so this was great. You mentioned at the end, you know, keep working on it until you feel like it's run its course. I'm curious if in your journey with the first company or with this company, if you've ever kind of faced that down, you've said, well, maybe this we have run the course, and kind of what went through your mind to get you to the next level?
I have a controversial answer. Failure is not an option for me. Like I think there's this fail fast mentality that it actually makes sense. Like logically, it makes sense. For personally, you're going to launch a business. You see it's not scaling. Go do something else. Like that makes a lot of sense. That doesn't work for me. You'll have to rip this company out of my fingernails if we're not failing. Like to me, that's just how I operate. It might actually not be the most logical or monetarily rational thing to do. Like I can probably start another startup and get a venture round. Like I can do it again, but and the same thing with my first company. Like it was easily a zero, easily, like many times, and I didn't have to sell it because it was almost a write-off when we sold it. It turned out to be a great exit, but like at the time, it was painful. I did a ton of work to get the exit done, and my investors weren't being nice to me. It wasn't like this good. It was not a good situation, but I was like, no one's getting a zero on this. This company's surviving. So that's my mentality. I don't know if it's the healthiest one, but that's just how I'm built. So that's what I do. But thanks for asking that, and I appreciate that. I don't know if that sounded too arrogant or not, but that's just how I am.
One last question for
Sure.
you. I've heard good and bad things about VC funding, of course, because
Yeah.
people are taking equity. In some cases, people take equity in your company and how that can be challenging, but it also allows you to scale. Can you speak to, with this company specifically, how has your experience been? Is it something that you recommend people doing? And what are the positives or challenges that you've experienced?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's really painful to try and get funding if you're not qualified for it. It sucks. So like, I think you can have 10 to 20 conversations and be like, oh, like, and really see the signals. If it does work and you are venture backable, it's great. It's an accelerator, and you have to hire people before you have the revenue and grow more quickly. I think in my experience, I haven't had the horror stories. At least with the first startup, maybe a little bit, but the second one, I think there's just like a lot of people aren't transparent with their own investors or themselves. They kind of hide under the desk. Where if I get bad news, I want to share it immediately, because to me it's like, this is sitting here. The longer I wait to share it, it's still going to be sitting there, right? So let me get it off my desk and share it with everyone. And it's not a good scene. So I try and be as transparent as possible, as quickly as possible, and that I have a great relationship with my investors, even in bad times, even in like, oh, this is going to get gnarly. Yeah. So look them in the eye, tell them the truth. That's what I would say. Sure.
First, I guess, I mean, this is pretty pretty deep, as far as, I guess, when you're talking about, you're comparing the two startups, is there any particular takeaways from your first startup that you would say, hey, when you got to your second startup, you said, I definitely don't want to do this, and that made a difference?
I mean, 100, but I'd say number one, have a co-founder. So I did the first thing solo. It's rough. So, I mean, like, I was like, oh, I don't want to have to ask permission for anyone. I want to be in charge. And, like, having a co-founder is night and day. Bounce ideas off of, sanity check things. You're just alone when you're solo. You're like, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. I was anti-co-founder. I'm like, I don't need a co-founder. Like, many people wanted to do the first startup with me. I wanted to do it by myself. That was silly. So that was my biggest takeaway, probably, number one. Then there's 100 other ones. I did a ton of wrong things. I made hundreds of mistakes over the last few years. So.
Just to piggyback off that,
Sure.
How did you find a co-founder for your second startup? Like, was it someone you knew? or
Yeah,
you-
it's someone I knew. I grew up with my co-founder. So no great co-founder dating story there. I knew him when I was in kindergarten, so we were friends. He was a startup guy too, so we'd been collaborating on stuff for years. Yeah, it's my buddy.
Anyone else?
Oh, one more.
So you talked a little bit about the culture, which I'm fangirling over. I love it. But how does that apply to the 500 clinicians that you have? So, what challenges have you faced when you're really trying to scale
Yeah,
up
I mean,
that
anyone here a
team?
clinician? No, probably not. Very interesting culture of clinicians. Like, they're like, obviously they're their own thing. I'd say, like, culturally distrusting of management, the administration, the institution of anyone. So, like, we work really hard to establish trust with the clinicians, and it starts with transparency. Like, just like, it's not easy. It's really not easy. But I think they're used to just like billing insurance and arguing and this and coding and arguing. Like, it's just like so you got to come to kind of reprogram them. I'm on your side. I want you to be successful. I want this to be the best place you've ever worked. And if we're not that for clinicians, the brand is really important for the clinicians so that they work for us and not another company. So I'd say, like, trust and transparency with them is really important. If they get like the payroll, someone like didn't enter their address right in the payroll system, so they didn't get paid. They like wrote a Facebook post, SteadyMD doesn't pay their doctors within a day. I'm like, what, you wrote your, like, it was just like very, like, you gotta like be really on top of that. Don't mess with the payments, I would say. Like, we struggled with that a little bit because we had so many clinicians, so like, that's the number one thing they're paranoid about. I don't know why, because we owe them the money. We're going to pay it, but like, don't ever always be really clear about the pay. I think that starts with trust. That's like a tactical thing, and then more like ooey gooey is like be transparent, trust, establish trust, and that's a day-to-day thing. It's not like one or two things. It's just like, just actually be that way. Don't just do it as a tactic. Be a trustworthy partner to them, and over the years it'll build up.
Do you have a clinician on your C-suite team?
Yeah, CMO. Yeah. It's been Dr. Josh. Been with us since the beginning. Anyone else? All right. This was fun. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.